Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Merritt Khan, a comedian and sales trainer based in Colorado. Merritt, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Sanjay. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm excited to have you on because I think you might be our very first comedian that's been on the show. Actually, no, you know what? I take that back. I think we've had some other folks that have done stand-up comedy as well. Maybe not as a full-time gig, and you're not a full-time gig either. It does seem like it's a part-time gig. It's multiple part-time gigs, kind of all making a full-time thing. But before we start diving into all of that stuff, and me just giving away your entire background, why don't you tell us about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Okay, well, I come from a family of sales professionals. Dad sold advertising, mom sold real estate. Grandfather had a used car lot. My grandmother sold Avon. So it was never really a question of what is Merritt going to do. It was more a question of what is Merritt going to sell. So I ended up opening up a sales and sales management training, coaching, consulting company after starting in media advertising sales, working in radio. And I'm really glad I had that experience because, you know, nothing happens until somebody sells something. So whatever I ended up doing in my life and certainly helps for what I'm doing now, I had to understand the basics of the sales process and sales communication and strategy and all of that stuff. So I ran my sales and sales marketing, sales management training company for over a decade. I still do a bit of coaching, consulting, and speaking. I'm often invited as a keynote speaker, breakout speaker for conferences on sales-related topics. And so I did that pretty much my entire career. Got certified in emotional intelligence, so I added that to the mix. And then for my 50th birthday, I wrote a one-woman inspiring comedy show. And I thought I was just going to perform it one time as a big party for my friends, a birthday thing. And I had so much fun. And I put my heart and soul into that people were absolutely blown away. And I knew right then I couldn't make this a one-night only experience. So that was November of 2019. So my plans to tour that and take that on the road were, squashed with COVID. And once everything started opening up again, I realized I really want to do something with my show. Then a friend of mine started a brand called Moms Unhinged. It's a stand-up comedy troupe of all mom comedians. And now we are touring the country, selling out theaters, big theaters of mostly mom audiences and a few very brave men. And I'm just having a blast touring as a stand-up comic. And now I'm venturing into something new with touring my own show. And so that's been my entrepreneurial journey, but always on a stage of some sort, whether it was a training stage, a keynote stage, or a theater stage. So that's what I do.
So I got to ask, very first thing that you ever sold, probably as a kid, what was that? Do you remember what it was?
Yep. Greeting cards. I had a little greeting card company. I went door to door. My parents gave me one of those greeting card kits or something. It was like, it was like you rub over with a crayon, the relief thing, and you had like these different things. And so I packaged them up and I had nice little bows and I was this cute little girl and I would knock on doors and say, would you like to buy some homemade greeting cards? Everybody feels better when they get handmade greeting card, and I sold greeting cards door to door.
So this is so interesting because I actually sold greeting cards door to door.
What? That's
but
crazy.
it wasn't handmade. I signed up at the back of a comic book and they were custom imprinted holiday greeting cards. And so this was back in the 80s when you couldn't make these at home or anything, right?
Huh.
And so you were ordering in the summertime for your holiday greeting cards, that the end of the year. And so I was going door to door selling these things, and then I had to, get the order in, and then, it was a whole ordeal to get it all done and stuff. But so I got to ask you about that because I feel like door to door sales, it's unfortunately not a thing anymore. And unfortunately, I mean, I guess it's fortunate for those of us that have homes that don't be bothered by the knocking, but it's unfortunate for the kids that don't have this chance to have this experience. Like, do you remember some of those times of knocking on doors and what happened? Like, do any of them stand out to you even now, so many years later?
Gosh, I haven't thought about those years for a really long time. I would say more recently than that, I was a Cub Scout troop leader for my son, and they would go door to door and do popcorn sales. And I don't recall any standout negative opportunities, where he's in his little uniform, we're together. So it's not like he's, real threatening. So people generally tend to open the door for the kid and the mom, like that.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, what are we going to take over? Like, there's nothing threatening about that. But what I remember teaching him was to pre-sell the next year. So it was like, thank you so much for this order. Are you open to it if I mark it down on my sheet that you would like to repurchase this for next year? Because certainly between now and when you get your order and the following year, I mean, you're going to eat 3 bags of popcorn, right? So you'll probably want to reorder next year. And people were not expecting that. That was something, I mean, I did the Girl Scout cookie sales, although there's an interesting story. Our troop leader ran away with the money. I'm sorry if there's any Girl Scout enthusiasts on the call, but I was devastated because I, of course, won the most, cookie sales, and I was really excited. We had this whole word thing, getting my badge or whatever. We had this thing planned in our little area, and she didn't show up. And I came to find out she skipped town with the money. And I'm like,
wow.
What? Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. That is not what you expect out of a Girl Scouts troop leader there. But
I'm sure it's still a wonderful organization. Just one bad apple, one bad apple.
I will say, like, I remember the times when I rang the doorbell and then the mom inside was upset because I woke up the sleeping baby, and then I was still trying to sell the cards. I don't think I made that sale, by the way, but I think it teaches you a lot about being able to sell in the face of kind of adversity, right? Like, things are going wrong, and yet you still have to be like, hey, I've got these things that I want to sell you.
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to think about in terms of, how do they think about doing sales for folks like this? But let's move back to kind of you and kind of the entrepreneurial ventures that you've had. So you worked at a radio station for a while. When was it that you decided to kind of go out on your own, and what precipitated that event?
Yeah, I worked in radio from 91 to 2000, till 98. And I was always on 100% commission plan. So I have never had a salary in my life. I've always created my own opportunities, created my own income, got paid in accordance to how hard I happened to be working at that moment in time. And in radio, the inventory is time. So the radio station was being sold. Now in radio, you make money in 2 ways. So you can sell the advertising and all of that on that side of the house. But the real big dollars are selling the real estate on the dial. So I happened to be working for a radio station at that time. I was a general sales manager, and the station was called Personal Achievement Radio. And we sold hit ideas. We played hit ideas like a music station would play a hit song. I thought it was a fabulous concept, and it really married everything I loved because I'm all about the inspiration and the motivation. I'm a cheerleader, and I love that stuff. So we had a deal with Nightingale Conant, and they made all those tapes. I'm dating myself now, cassette tapes back in the day. So when the radio station property was sold, I had an opportunity to say, okay, well, am I going to just work for another radio station, or is it time to do something else? And I happened to have worked, I was in sales training classes as a participant, and as a sales manager for the radio station, I was in the management course, and I put all of my salespeople through this particular sales methodology. And the guy who was doing that training happened to be somebody that I used to work for in the radio business. So we had a relationship, and he knew I was a great salesperson, and he was ready to expand on his training company. And so he said, well, why work in radio? Why don't you come work with me and let's build this, sales training company? And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And he sort of brought me on as a 1099. So basically I had my own business. I was responsible for, it was 100% commission. But I had his thing to sell. And so that was helpful for me. And that really began my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. So when was it that, so you started this, and you still had a thing to sell, right? Like somebody else's thing. Yeah. When was it that you made a move to your own thing completely?
So in 2008, we moved from Chicago to Colorado. And that was when I cut ties completely with that sales training organization and thought, I can build a better mousetrap. At that point, I had a decade of sales management, training, coaching, consulting under my belt. And I had started to see some of the things that were not working as well with that particular methodology and things that I would change. And so when I moved to Colorado, I opened up my own business. And that was when I really, started growing my own training program. And I knew that I didn't want to do it exactly the same way that I had done it before. At this point, I'd already been hired as a professional speaker, keynoter. And so I really kind of wanted to shift the business model. So it was more of a speaking business. And then the training and the coaching supported, was an additional revenue stream as opposed to leading with training and then getting a few speaking engagements. So I kind of flipped it. And that was really my own secret sauce. And I called it merit-based business.
Yeah. Well, so why that approach? Why make speaking the main thing versus training the main thing?
At that point, I really discovered that I loved the big stages. I loved being that person that would just sort of open somebody's mind to a new possibility of what they could do. And as a keynoter, mostly what you want to do is just sort of inspire that change, inspire that shift in belief that has you in action doing something a little different to create a new possibility. As a trainer, I was seeing the same people over and over and over again, teaching them something very specific and very detailed and very actionable. And that was great. But I really felt the pull to bigger stages and to have an opportunity to influence others that more was possible. And that was really what drove that. And, I'm pretty good at it.
So when you started this, how did you get going, right? Like starting from scratch again, you've moved to a new location. Yep. Did you have the contacts from before? Were you using the contacts from before? Did you start from scratch? How did you approach this as building this brand new business?
Yeah, great question. So I've just always been a big believer in, just getting out in the marketplace, let people see you, experience you. So I did a lot of, what I call showcase programs. So I would do, I guess you could call it like a free marketing talk, but I was very strategic in the places that I wanted others to see me. And so I did a lot of showcases. At that point, I had relationships with speakers bureaus, and they would hire me and send me out on opportunities. And so I worked those relationships. I was always very good at taking my existing relationships and letting them know, like, here's what I got going on. Who do you know in Colorado? Who do you know that does that works for an association as an event planner? So I've always been very good naturally at just developing further the relationships that I had built. And that was really my focus at that time. It's not, I was not at all distracted. I mean, really, social media wasn't really the thing then. We had Instagram when I moved and started that business. So it wasn't a digital strategy. It was always very much a relationship strategy.
Yeah. Was there anything that made you nervous about doing this? This is the first time kind of really on your own, and it's all on your shoulders at this point. There's no product to sell. There's no service. It's your stuff, right? Anything that made you nervous? And if so, how did you get over that for yourself?
Oh, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. I think every entrepreneur is nervous because, of course, you're taking on risk. But I minimized the risk. So instead of paying rent for a training center and all those things, when I switched the business model to focus as a speaker, really I didn't have much overhead. So that was helpful in taking down some of the nervousness I had about that. I knew at that point that I had a good long history of creating something out of nothing. And I knew that the work and effort involved in building and developing those relationships and making those connections. But I was married at the time, and I was the primary breadwinner. So I didn't have a lot of bandwidth or room for failure. I really needed to get this up and running quickly. I was smart. I've always been smart about my money, though. So I had plenty of cash reserves so that I knew that there would be a ramp up period, and I adjusted my revenue goals so that I could develop and spend the time to really cultivate this new market. But at the same time, I knew that I had opportunities coming, and it was the right timing. I planned it as best I could.
Yeah. How long did it take you from kind of jump of starting this whole thing to getting your first client or getting somebody to pay for services?
It actually didn't really take me that long. I'm not sure exactly, but I would say within 90 days, I was seeing enough traction that, I was feeling good about things. And, I also had things on the calendar that were generating revenue. So it wasn't like I was starting from ground zero. I had income coming in because I had speaking engagements that were already booked. And so there was revenue there. It was just, I was just sort of changing the model. But it didn't take too long to really kind of get settled in that, because I at that point, I knew what to do to build a business. I knew what to do to support clients. I had a great reputation, have a great reputation as a good coach and a good sales trainer. I had people that were referring me in this new market. So I stacked the deck as best I could in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of looking back now, you've been doing this for a number of years on your own. This is, to me, these are always kind of hard businesses because there's no recurring revenue, right? In your business, or is there?
Not so much with the speaking model, right?
Right.
That is like, sell it, get paid well, and then go out and get the next gig. There are certainly some things that many of my professional speaking colleagues have done way better than me, like, selling ongoing services and different things to speaking engagements. But I always kind of looked at it like all of my effort and energy is going into making this thing that you just paid me for the best. And I want to get referrals to other groups that I can go in, speak, and leave. It's not a good model for recurring revenue, which is why the coaching and consulting business and the work that I did when I got certified in emotional intelligence, and I folded that into the sales process, that had a lot more of that ongoing revenue coaching, ongoing coaching client type of opportunities. And so I've always had some of those in my hopper. I've done retainer deals with companies that, bring me in for whatever their sales challenges are, or I'm working with their whole sales team. And, there's lots of different creative ways that I've worked with companies on a retainer basis, and that kind of smooths out the revenue, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
And gives them a lot of flexibility, and, they don't always know what they need. So sometimes I'll do just what can I do for you? You got me for 90 days. Here's the amount. Let's not worry about counting the hours and all of that. Like, you got me. I'm yours. You're a priority.
Yeah.
What needs to get done?
So that was actually my question. So because there is no necessarily recurring revenue, right? You get into periods where, like, every quarter or every month, you're starting from zero again, right? You've got to climb that mountain. And there can be lulls in sales sometimes, right? Like, for whatever is happening, right? Macroeconomic, microeconomics issues. So how do you think about that for yourself as a business in terms of being able to deal with that? Is that just building a big cash war chest and making sure you can write it out, or is it something else?
Well, I'm going to give kudos to one of my favorite business coaches that I've worked with for a number of years, Mark LeBlanc. He has a company called Growing Your Business, and he really taught me that to look at my business as 30-day rolling average. So I sort of had to switch my mindset from, every year I have this particular goal. So I have a monthly number that I need to hit to pay all my bills, and then I have a monthly optimistic number that's like, woo, I'd really love to hit that one. But I've kind of nailed down, like, and I'm looking at my numbers every single day, and I've nailed down that, how much I need to do. And, I know when I need to get nervous as I'm looking my rolling averages, but that's really helped a little bit.
Yeah. How are you calculating that rolling average? That's an interesting, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody thinking about or looking at their revenue in a 30-day rolling average. So is there some software that you're using, or are you just calculating by hand? How are you doing that?
He actually gives his clients this magical spreadsheet that does all of that for me. And I just look at it, and it tells me color codes. Once I just put in, the dollar amount of the sale that I made that day, and it calculates out every single day I'll be able to look at it and go, oh, it's green. That means I'm pacing well. And oh, it's red. Oh, I better sell something today. So I don't know how it does this magic. I just use it.
Is it taking that revenue and spreading it out over the length of the engagement, or is it just based on that day, that sale counts, and then it's doing an average over the 30 days?
Yep, it's really just looking at deposits. So
got it.
It's, I mark it down as, somebody gave me a commitment for this money, and then when the money hits the bank account, it goes into a different column. So it's
right.
Really calculating that.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And I'm going to have to think about that and how that could apply to other businesses potentially too. You could think about a restaurant maybe that's doing a 30-day average, and, you might have a really bad day, but if overall your 30 days are trending up, then that bad day all of a sudden doesn't feel so bad, right?
It's super interesting. I mean, it really changed how I think about revenue. But now with my one-woman show, that's a whole nother business model. And so now I'm trying to do two things simultaneously. They're both entrepreneurial ventures, but one is bigger ticket speaking engagements that happen, periodically, and those are nice big chunks of money. And then there's, $25 tickets to my one-woman show. It's like, what? But I've got, 6 shows on the books. I'm simultaneously selling tickets to all 6 shows in different venues across 3 different states. And now I've got a track. And so I'm looking out I'm looking at that revenue very differently too, because most ticket sales, unfortunately, happen that last week before showtime. And so you're panicked. You're absolutely panicked. Like, oh my God, nobody's coming to my show. I just spent around $1,000 renting this theater and buying insurance and travel expenses. And like, I already have this huge outlay. And I don't even know if, it's like, God, I hope I cover
It's going to be you and 3 other people in a big giant arena.
I mean, that is terrifying. And, and so, fortunately I've done enough of these now that I know that 50% of the ticket sales are going to happen that last week. And I kind of wish I could just strangle every single person and be like, seriously, have you ever planned something? Like, don't you run to the mailbox when, like, to get an RSVP? Like, remember when you planned your wedding? Like, people are counting on this. Like, buy your ticket.
I think the challenge with events like that too, and I've run events as well, is that people don't want to commit until they're sure that they're going to actually be able to come.
Yeah, or nothing better's coming along, and I'm like,
right, exactly, right.
The show's really good.
it's that FOMO thing too that comes into play as well. So yeah, for all the event organizers out there, like I think both of us feel your pain. It is a tough business to be in, organizing these kinds of things and events, because people are just awful with the timing stuff, and it makes you understand and realize why so many event organizers then do pre-sales and discounted sales early to try to move that earlier. But I don't know that I've ever heard of a silver bullet that solves that problem, because it does not seem to exist yet.
I don't know. If you find one, you better call me.
I will absolutely be monetizing whatever silver bullet I find, because all of us have that same pain. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of health and wellness. And, you're running around doing a lot of things. Like, how do you think about that, in terms of taking care of yourself and being able to do all of these things?
I love that question, because I think I have done that very poorly at times. And, the challenge of an entrepreneur is you're doing so much, you're doing everything. And I've also had lone wolf syndrome. So I'm one of those people, like I rarely hire the team around me for support until I'm desperate for the team. And so I do too much. That's just kind of how I've been wired. And happily, I've learned that lesson. I'm better now. But in those, periods of time, the first thing that gets axed off my to-do list is taking care of myself. And what I've only recently, sadly, recognized is, those, if I'm down for the count, especially now that I'm doing this one woman show, like, there is no stand-in, and same with keynoting. Like, I have to be there. I have to be on. I have to be healthy. I have to be have the energy to travel and to be influential and energetic and entertaining and educational for a room of, 1,000 people or more. It's a lot. And so I have really learned that anchoring my days with 3 hours that are me and that are health related every day. I'm a Peloton enthusiast, so I do something on my Peloton, and I do some stretching because I'm old now and I need to do that. And I have my time to not eat. I used to do the eat your breakfast at your desk type thing. And now I just, no, I'm going to eat. And usually that's my time to, learn something. And so I'll listen to a podcast that I want to learn about, or one that I'm going to be interviewed on, so I can get familiar with it. But I use that time. But health is so important. And I'm just, as a performer, I train for my sport, which is the stage. And you wouldn't believe how much energy, like, when I'm done with a keynote, I feel like I ran a marathon. I don't know what that feels like, because I've never run a marathon, but I'm imagining it feels like that. And you don't realize it, but your brain takes up a lot of energy, and, there's research on that. And so really does drain you. And I know that I need every bit of energy. And so working out is not really a nice to have for me. It's really training for my sport.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. The times that I've keynoted or emceed events, man, you're on your feet the entire day. And it can get very, very long and draining by the end of it. Sometimes when I used to do my own events, I would be like knocked out for a couple of days afterwards because it takes a lot out of you. Last question for you, Merritt. This has been fantastic. If you thinking back kind of over your career, everybody has things that, oh man, now that I know what I know, if I could go back in time and do that again, I would do it this way instead. Is there something that stands out to you that you would do differently?
I really kind of wish I would have had a little bit more big company experience before I ventured on to my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, I really started as an entrepreneur in my 20s. And I think I would have, I don't know for sure, but I think had I taken a little bit more time, I never had profit sharing or, stock options or, I just never had that, or a company that paid my health insurance really. Like I just always did that on my own. Sometimes I wonder if that kind of stunted some of my growth potential.
Because you didn't understand how that world worked or for some other reason?
It's interesting because I feel like I understand how that world works from a very different perspective because many of my clients work for much bigger companies than I ever did. So
right.
I got enough of an understanding, but I do think that it just would have given me a little bit more of a chance to learn about some of the basics of business before I had to learn it on my own dime. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, Merritt, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
Business-wise, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So it's just Merritt Kahn, MERITKAHN. I'd love for you to, follow me on my Instagram or Facebook or whatever is your thing of choice. But OPD show, my show is called Optimistic Personality Disorder. We can do a little comedy about that. But opdshow.com is a great place to learn about the show and get tickets, for wherever you are on the planet and just sign up for alerts. So that's a fun thing. And merrittcon.com will take you to all things that are speaking and sales related.
There you go. Thanks so much for being on today, Merritt.
Thanks so much, Sanjay. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. That's HISCOX.com. And if you have a story you want to hear on this podcast, please visit hiscox.com/share your story. I'm your host, Sanjay Parikh. You can find out more about me at my website, sanjayparikh.com.